With a series spanning 16 movies, several one-shots, and countless hours of television, it would be virtually impossible for the Marvel Cinematic Universe to get away with zero contrivances. But while the movies don't always explain everything in perfect detail, that doesn't mean there's a gap in logic or a continuity-destroying problem. Let's do our best to play devil's advocate, shall we? I'm Ben from Whatculture, and here are 10 MCU plot holes that aren't actually plot holes. Number 10. Electricity affects Iron Man's armor differently. The Avengers. When Iron Man fights Thor, Thor fires a huge bolt of lightning directly at him, but instead of this winning the battle for Thor, Tony's suit absorbs the lightning and becomes more powerful. But in Iron Man 2, Tony is shown to have great difficulty with Whiplash's electric whips, with his suit suffering a massive amount of damage and very nearly being destroyed. It sounds like a problem, but it may not be. For starters, Tony is always improving and refining his technology, so after discovering that his suits were weak to this type of attack, he would have focused on making his future suits more shockproof. Number 9. Rocket understands Quill's POLLOCK joke. Guardians of the Galaxy. In Guardians of the Galaxy, Peter Quill makes a joke about the fact that his ship would look like a Jackson Pollock painting if he shone a black light around the place. In response, Rocket correctly informs him that he has issues, with the implication being that the raccoon understands the Pollock reference. But how could he, given that he lives and operates in space? Many view this as a glaring flaw, something that essentially breaks Rocket's backstory, but it does make some sense. Rocket never acknowledges that he doesn't know who Jackson Pollock is, and that's because he doesn't need this information to understand the joke. Hell, I wasn't fully familiar with Pollock or his work, but from context I could piece together what Star-Lord was saying. Perhaps the bigger question is this: how does Quill know the artist's work if he was abducted at the age of 8 or 9? Number 8. Tony doesn't activate the house party protocol sooner. Iron Man 3. During Iron Man 3's climactic battle, Tony and Rhodey both agree they need a little backup, at which point dozens and dozens of unmanned Iron Man suits fly in to assist the pair in taking down Aldrich Killian and rescuing the President. Many people questioned why Tony didn't do this earlier in the battle or even earlier in the film. Something a lot of people missed here, though, is that Tony actually activates the house party protocol while on the speedboat with Rhodey, which is a good chunk of time before the final battle even begins. The reason the suits appear to arrive at the last possible second is because they have to travel from Stark's home all the way to the shipping container yard where the fight is happening. But why not do it even earlier? Well, he physically couldn't, you fool! Earlier in the film, his home is destroyed, covering all the unmanned suits in a thick layer of rubble. They have to dig them out first. Number 7. Thor returns to Earth even though the Bifrost Bridge is gone. The Avengers. At the end of Thor, the titular god gets into an emotionally charged scrap with his sort of brother Loki. The ensuing fisticuffs result in the Bifrost Bridge, the gateway that leads from Asgard to the other realms, being destroyed. We're told there's no way Thor will be able to return to Earth as a result of this, so it was surprising to see him pop up on Earth with little explanation in the Avengers. Just how did he make this journey without the Bifrost? This has been a big point of contention over the years, but it's important to point out that although the explanation offered by the film is flimsy, it's an explanation nonetheless. Loki asks Thor how much dark energy the All-Father had to summon to send Thor to Earth, which indicates that this was a dangerous, possibly frowned upon process, or something that Odin wants to do. All he wants is for Loki to be brought to justice, and so does whatever he can to see that happen. Number 6. Thanos gives Loki an Infinity Stone. The Avengers. Why would Thanos give away one of the stones when his goal is to snag all of them? This has bugged fans for years, but there are actually several points that together do offer a solid explanation. Firstly, Loki needs the assistance of the Chitauri army in order to dominate the Earth. In a deleted scene featuring Loki talking with the Other, Thanos' trusted follower, it's implied that the scepter gives Loki the ability to control the Chitauri, so it was necessary that he wielded it. That covers the issue entirely, but also consider what Thanos has to gain. If Loki succeeds in obtaining the Tesseract, Thanos won't just have one Infinity Stone, he'll have 2. A risk on Thanos' part, but one that he was willing to take. Number 5. Fury says there are other heroes in the world, but there aren't. Iron Man. In Iron Man's post-credits scene, Nick Fury mysteriously appears in Tony Stark's home asking him, "You think you're the only superhero in the world?" The implication here is that Fury knows about the other superheroes and enhanced individuals, but how could he, given that Iron Man was the first movie in the MCU apart from the sort of Hulk film, and there were no references to other superpowered beings during its runtime? How is there already an Avenger initiative? This is easily explained. While Thor, Doctor Strange, Scarlet Witch, and a whole host of other heroes didn't show up until later, there were loads of heroes that Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D. would have had on their radar at the time this post-credits scene took place. Hawkeye and Black Widow were already working with Fury at the time, so there's two possible candidates for the Avengers. Bruce Banner was being monitored, and we still have Captain Marvel to come, which is set in the 90s. Number 4. ZEMO'S plan doesn't make sense. Captain America Civil War. Helmut Zemo's plan in Captain America Civil War was ridiculed by many for how outlandish it seemed. For example, the plan relied on nobody knowing what the psychiatrist sent to interview Bucky Barnes looked like, and Zemo was also counting on Bucky being captured in the first place. In the movie, his plan ultimately works, but isn't that incredibly silly and incredibly unlikely? Maybe the movie didn't do a perfect job of explaining the small details of his exploits, but if you look at the plan's basic outline, it's not as contrived as it appears on the surface. All Zemo does is frame Bucky for the UN bombing in order to have him captured, which gives Zemo the opportunity to interview Bucky and glean information about the secret Hydra facility where the tape of the Stark assassination is stored. Once he has that tape, he's essentially won. He could release it to the public, send it to Tony in the post, or just hold on to it until the right time. Tony showing up at the Hydra base was just a happy accident. It's never stated that this was part of Zemo's plan. Number 3. Extremis saves Pepper, but Tony never uses it again. Iron Man 3. At the end of Iron Man 3, Pepper Potts falls to her death, or so we're made to think. She actually survived the fall thanks to the Extremis virus, a technology that can heal people, make them stronger, and even regrow limbs. Tony removes the virus from Pepper in order to make her normal again, and it hasn't been seen in an MCU movie since. But if Tony was familiar with this technology and could use it for good, why does he just leave it alone? Couldn't Extremis be used to help out Rhodey after his injury in Captain America Civil War? That seems like a logical choice, but bear in mind, Extremis is also capable of blowing people up, and that seems like a big enough factor to deter Tony from using it further, which explains why he hasn't messed with it since Iron Man 3. Number 2. Tony is Iron Man again, despite retiring in Iron Man 3, Avengers Age of Ultron. At the end of Iron Man 3, Tony gives a speech about not needing his Iron Man armor and how it was just a cocoon. Tony's line, "And now I'm a changed man," made it seem like he was moving on from his Iron Man days and focusing on helping the world as Tony Stark and not as a vigilante hero. And then Avengers Age of Ultron happened and Tony was back in the suit, so what happened? Well, there's another line in his speech, "I am Iron Man," and while that could be taken to mean Tony views himself as a hero, whether he wears a suit or not, it could also be taken literally. He isn't outright abandoning the suits. His decision to remove the shrapnel and arc reactor is him burying the demons of his past, halting that over-reliance on his armor that plagued him throughout Iron Man 3. Age of Ultron does continue this story thread. Tony is working on Ultron, a global peacekeeping program that would remove the need for heroes, and while this plan goes wrong, the intent is still there. Number 1. Banner suddenly learns to control his Hulk powers. The Avengers. This problem has been brought up time and time again since the Avengers first opened, but the moment in which Bruce Banner transforms into the Hulk and takes down a Chitauri Leviathan while in full control of his actions is perfectly in keeping with everything we already know about the character. Bruce didn't suddenly develop this power right when it became useful. In fact, he can already control his Hulk transformations at the beginning of the movie. Right at the start of the film, Bruce angrily lashes out at Black Widow just so he can see her reaction. Would he deliberately make himself angry if he knew there was a chance the Hulk could be unleashed? Of course not, because he can already control his powers. Then flash forward to the time bomb argument scene. Here, Bruce literally says he will show the other Avengers that he can transform at will, but is interrupted by the beeping computer. The reason why Hulk turned aggressive on the helicarrier is because he was being manipulated by Loki and the Mind Stone, and Hawkeye's explosion caught him off guard. He only loses control due to the unprecedented nature of the circumstances, but usually he's in full control of his abilities. And that's our list. Make sure you subscribe to the Whatculture YouTube channel for more lists like this, and don't forget to visit whatculture.com for daily news and articles. I'm Ben from Whatculture, and thanks for watching.